Hello there. If you like truth, you'll like it here. Welcome. If you don't, or if you believe in groupthink or bullying others into believing the popular opinion, then this isn't the place for you. So go ahead and just cancel me now. On this channel, we don't discuss my truth or your truth. We discuss the truth, and no topic is off limits. So, log in, like, subscribe, get comfy, and comment. It's nice to have you here. So let's talk. Dear Martell Holt, full disclosure, I wish I could have told you this was going to end badly. I wish I would have known you before you ruined your life, before you met the Scotts, before you met your mistress, before you even began entertaining the idea of stepping out on your wife, on your family. I wish I would have known you back when you had it all, back when you were a successful black man, married to a successful black woman, under the shield of God, and tasked with bringing forth what would have been a successful and intact family that would have and could have served as an example to others. I would have told you that you would have the world at your feet, that your legacy was bright, and as such, that it would attract the attention of demons that meant to distract you from your destiny. I would have told you that you weren't the first to see it end so badly, to see your life ripped apart right before your very eyes. You see, this has happened before, and unfortunately, it will happen again. Let me tell you the story of Charlie. We'll call him Chuck for short. Chuck was big for his age. He was so big that he was able to pass for 18 when he was many years younger. And he used that to be able to get a full-time job after school to help his mom with his younger siblings. Chuck had always been a hard worker. One day, Chuck met Sydney. Sydney was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, but she had a boyfriend. So Chuck waited patiently behind the scenes until Sydney was available. Then he pulled out all the stops when she and her boyfriend broke up. Chuck would be late getting to work after school because he insisted on walking Sydney home from school. Chuck helped Sydney's mom by cutting her grass on the weekends when he was off from work, just so he could see Sydney. When Sydney was homesick, Chuck got his mom to make her some of his mom's famous beef stew, and he dropped it off to her on his way to class. When he got off from school, he went to check on her. And when he learned that Sydney had chicken pox, he walked over to the local grocery store and bought Sydney the biggest container of Quaker oatmeal he could find. He did that because when he called his mom and asked how he could help Sydney, his mom had told him Sydney needed to soak in oats. Chuck hadn't known that there was a special type of oats Sydney needed. He had done the best he could. And when Sydney's mom saw that Chuck had bought Sydney some Quaker oatmeal so she could soak in them due to her chicken pox, even Sydney's mom knew Chuck was going to be a keeper. Needless to say, Chuck won Sydney's heart. He and Sydney became high school sweethearts and married in their first semester of college. At their wedding, all in attendance laughed when Sydney's best friend recounted the story of Chuck buying Sydney Quaker oatmeal instead of soaking oats back when she had chicken pox in high school. Theirs was a marriage made in heaven, and their love shone brightly to anyone, anywhere, in or even near their presence. This continued for many years. I should say here that Chuck was a very handsome man. He was tall and had beautiful chocolate skin and a head full of jet black hair. He also had a goatee that he kept neatly trimmed. He had dropped out of college after his and Sydney's first semester and had chosen a career where he worked with his hands. So in addition to being tall and well manicured, he was also quite muscular. Also, because Chuck was a hard worker, he and Sydney always had a bit of money and lived rather comfortably. Between his looks and his means, not surprisingly, Chuck often received a lot of attention from women, but he paid them no mind. About 10 years and 3 kids into their marriage, things changed and Chuck began to step out. He would later admit he only did so because he could. It was easy, he had said. Women just threw themselves at me, and I cheated because I could, he admitted. He also didn't think Sydney would ever leave him. Even though Chuck had dropped out of college, he still made more than Sydney, and he was the breadwinner. Never mind the fact that Sydney was also now a mom to 3 children. So Chuck figured Sydney would never leave, so he allowed himself to occasionally step out. He figured he was somewhat allowed, being he was the breadwinner and a relatively good husband who brought all his money home. Well, all the money he wasn't spending on his other women. Sydney found out about Chuck's cheating quite by accident. Her middle child had fallen ill one day and called Sydney to pick her up from school. Sydney had left work and rushed to her child's school, picked the child up, and was on the way home. Needing to stop by the store to grab some orange juice for her sick child, she took a different way home. Her middle child was sitting in the front seat, desperately trying to fall asleep. But, being that she was feeling poorly, she was struggling to do so. She'd had her seat reclined as she was trying to fall asleep, but when she saw that it was no use, she raised her seat up just in time to see her dad's truck. "Isn't that Dad's truck?" her middle child innocently asked. Sydney had been so lost in her thoughts of what she needed to grab from the store and what work she'd need to make up when she was back in the office that she hadn't even noticed. But sure enough, when she looked in the direction of where her middle child was pointing, she saw that it was indeed her husband's gray truck, parked in front of a home she didn't know and had never seen before. Sydney started to see stars. She felt faint. It was like she knew right away. Years later, when her middle child was an adult, even she would admit to feeling a knot in her stomach. She was so young, certainly too young to know what was going on, but even she could feel that their lives were about to forever change. Sydney drove up to the house and parked. She took a deep breath, turned to her middle child, mustered up a fake smile, and told her middle child she'd be right back. Her middle child nodded, too afraid to speak, and watched her mom walk up to the door and knock, lightly at first, then with a hardness she had never seen from her mom before. In what felt like hours, her dad emerged, half-dressed, from behind the door, and the middle child watched as her mom stumbled back and gripped her chest. She looked like those people in the movies who were having or about to have a heart attack. Her mom quickly walked back to the car they were in and drove off, not even bothering to put on her seatbelt. Needless to say, they never made it to the store that day. And to this day, the thought of orange juice, let alone the sight and smell of it, still makes Sydney's middle daughter nauseous. That was a Wednesday. By that Saturday, Sydney's mom had moved them out of the house into a small apartment. It was the last time she would ever live with both of her parents again. That was 20 years ago. Sydney is now a happily married woman with a loving, doting husband who treats her like a queen. She owns her own home, rents out another, and she and her equally successful husband take 2 to 3 cruises a year and always host the family for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Her mom is still as fit and fine as she was back in the day and looks like a woman who is being loved well. She has since retired from the job she used to have and spends her days volunteering when she wants and traveling. She has never looked back. Sydney's ex-husband's story is a little different. Sydney's ex-husband moves from house to house with whatever woman he is currently dating. He owns no home of his own. He drives an old truck from job to job, and he still works the same hands-on job he used to work. The only difference is he is older now and can't work as hard or as fast and has ailments that sideline him for days and sometimes weeks at a time. Like the time he broke his ankle and couldn't work for 8 weeks, so there was no money coming in for those 8 weeks. His girlfriend had to pay the bills by herself during that time, and she was not happy. Sydney's ex-husband is no longer fit. He is overweight and has a slight bend on his previously tall frame. The bend is from days and nights of back-breaking hard work. To say the years have caught up to him would be putting it mildly. Sydney's ex-husband does not own a home, hasn't had a vacation in over 15 years, and doesn't have the room in his apartment to host any family gatherings. So he drops in at the kids' houses. That is, the kids that he still has a relationship with. Not all of the kids talk to him. Some have never forgiven him for cheating on their mom, and some never grew up with him and don't really know him because their moms were side pieces he cheated on his wife with. Even the ones he was involved with that came from his affairs have somewhat tumultuous relationships with him because they resent not growing up with a father and feel he chose his children for marriage over them. Some of the children get along and some don't. Only one of the 3 children born inside the marriage talks to any of the other 4 born outside of it. And that child does so because he himself went on to make several babies outside of his marriage. Like father, like son. So he would be a hypocrite not to accept his half-siblings. The others only have a casual hello and goodbye relationship. As for Sydney's middle child, she admits that every time she talks to her dad, he asks about her mom and expresses his deep regret that he cheated. He admits to anyone that will listen that he still loves his ex-wife and would do anything to go back in time and not cheat. He talks about wishing he and his ex-wife were still in the same home so they could welcome the grandchildren over the holidays and be all together as a family. When his out-of-wedlock children hear him talk this way, it makes them sad because it makes them feel like they are a mistake their dad regrets. Her dad is sad every day, and though it breaks Sydney's middle child's heart to see her dad this way, it also reminds her that he is simply having to lay in the bed he made. Martell, you're not the first to sacrifice his treasure tomorrow for a mere pittance today. Just in case you don't understand, the pittance that I'm talking about is and was your mistress. Sadly, you won't be the last. All right, y'all. That's it, and that's all.